I'm doing NBA superstar Donald Trump. You know, he's one of my favorite white basketball players after Larry Bird. I have a memory of watching him dunk over Michael Jackson. Just dunked over Michael Jackson. To commemorate that memory, I'll be doing a piece on DJT. I'm working with watercolors this week, starting off with a little drawing, gonna go over that with paints, and we'll see how it turns out. Instead of walking through my process, I'm gonna share a story that is a bit relevant to this painting that I'm working on. The Emperor's New Clothes. It's a literary fairy tale written by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen. It tells a story about a vain emperor that gets exposed in front of his subjects. It was first published in 1837, and since then has gone on to be translated and published in over 100 different languages. The story is about an emperor obsessed with material goods, in particular fancy new clothes, and he prioritizes these over the well-being of his own state. In an attempt to take advantage of the emperor's vanity and his self-importance, two con men visit the capital in the guise of weavers. Weavers are craftspeople that weave together fabrics and make clothing. They approach the king and offer to supply him with lavish new clothes that are invisible to the likes of stupid people and incompetent people. That's their pitch. They make a big show of it and get the emperor all hyped up, who, being obsessed with clothes, has all the trendy new fashions. He's got all the new fabrics. He's adorned with the best clothes there are, and this catches his attention. It's something he doesn't have and he wants. And these con men, they praise this emperor and they big him up. They shower him with praises, and the emperor, being gullible to anyone basically who praises him, accepts their offer and hires them. And they set up a space in the palace and get to work. During the weaving of these imaginary fabrics, the emperor's officials take turns in inspecting the progress of these clothes. One by one, they'll approach these weavers and see that there's nothing on their loom. Basically, it's empty. There's no clothes, there's no nothing. But after hearing the story of these fabrics, that anyone who can't see them is either stupid or inept, none of these officials want to speak up about it. Individually, they'll go look at it, see nothing, but don't want to raise their voice as they might be seen as stupid or inept. So they play along and follow along to keep their social status and return to the emperor with great news. The fabrics are coming along. They look wonderful. Finally, the emperor wants to see how these robes or this new clothing is coming along. He approaches the weavers to take a look at their progress. He also sees nothing on their looms. From what he can tell, they're not doing anything. But he's bought into the story. He's bought into the fact that you need to be smart and capable in order to see these, and not wanting to be seen as anything but that pretends to see these fabrics. He's excited. Finally, the weavers claim they're finished. They approach the emperor. They mime putting the fabrics on him, adorning him with these new clothes, and they start praising him. They start telling him how great he looks, how smart he looks, how royal he looks. And the emperor buys into all of this. With the so-called fabrics being worn, the emperor showing off to his officials, who individually see no clothes on the emperor. But as a group, they pretend they do, because none of them want to claim that they are inept, that they are stupid, because they're not seeing any clothes. They all just play along. And with this shared fallacy, the emperor decides he's gonna have a procession through his town to show off to his people these amazing new fabrics. The con men by this point have left. They've gotten paid. The emperor seems happy, his officials seem happy. The con men get paid, they leave, they bounce. The emperor is excited with his new fabrics and decides, I'm gonna have a procession through my kingdom to show off to my subjects what a great emperor I am. So the emperor sets off on a procession through the town with his officials following behind, all praising him and repeating the terms of this fabric. That if you can't see them, you must be stupid or inept or incapable. And the townsfolk who are hearing this don't want to admit to one another that the emperor is naked and is proceeding down the streets completely unclothed, followed by his officials spouting what seems to be praise of this emperor. And although uncomfortable, they play along, the townsfolk that is, as to not be seen as inept. At a certain point of this procession, a child from the crowd abruptly points out that the emperor has no clothes, that the emperor is wearing nothing at all. Hearing this child, the townsfolk realize that they're not alone in their experience, and they start joining the child by repeating his claims that the emperor has no clothes. Now, by this point, the entire town has agreed that they see a naked emperor in front of him, one who's wearing nothing. But the emperor himself is not willing to admit that he's been played or been taken advantage of. So he and his officials continue their procession while making the same untrue claims about these fabrics. And at this point, they're only fooling themselves. The emperor's new clothes. What's the point of the story? So this has been translated in over 100 different languages, and that typically only happens when a story is relatable throughout different cultures, throughout different groups of people. This one being the case. What are we supposed to take out of this story? Power, to a certain degree, to a big degree, I think, depends on a collective belief. Authority is most often imposed by force, but to maintain it requires a degree of acceptance and participation by those that the authority is imposed on. There's a claim that power often dissolves once people stop believing in it. Another takeaway is that lies are sustained by fear of social judgment. People often lie because they're fooled or misinformed. But I think most of the time people will uphold a lie out of fear. Fear of being seen as incompetent, being seen as standing alone, or fear of losing their status. I think in this story, cowardice is the real villain. Another takeaway is that truth is quite simple, but admitting it is hard. Although in the story it's obvious that this emperor is naked, people are looking at a naked man claiming to be adorned by fabrics, but no one's willing to admit it first. Except for the child, who we can think in this case has nothing to lose in the case of their social status. So a bit of history about the story. This tale by Andersen is believed to be based on a story from 1335 from a collection of medieval cautionary tales. These tales were Spanish in origin. The Spanish version of the emperor's new clothes consists of a group of weavers. They play the same con to their king, but they claim that anyone unable to see the fabric is not the legitimate child of their presumed father. So, another social stigma from a different time, from a different culture, but put in place to control social thinking. It's a cultural faux pas from a different time and different culture. Another version of the story exists from India with a similar moral. In this version, the weavers con the king, and they claim that the fabric can only be seen by those of legitimate birth. Again, another type of faux pas from a different culture. How much of this fable applies to people in daily life? There was a study done by psychologist Solomon Asch. He performed a series of experiments in the 1950s to test the effects of conformity on an individual. These were called the Asch conformity experiments. Starting in 1951, several groups of 8 college-aged males were placed together in a room and asked questions about their perception of a specific situation. In this situation, a straight line was displayed on one card. And on another card, there were 3 straight lines, all of different lengths, labeled A, B, and C. On the second card, with 3 lines, one of those lines matched up to the line of the first card in length. The other 2 lines on the second card were either shorter or longer by a considerable degree. And each participant was asked to correspond the line from the first card to a matching line on the second card based on length. From the first card, you have 1 line, this long, and shown a second card with 3 lines. Which of the lines from the second card match up to the length of the line from the first card? Now, here's the catch. 7 out of 8 of the participants in each group were actors or plants by the researchers. So they were given instructions prior to the experiment of how to answer the researcher's question, as to create an environment where a group of people or a group of participants are all sharing a group fallacy. Now, each time this experiment was done, all 7 actors were asked first in order to prime the actual test subject. After hearing the answers from all 7 actors, the participant would be asked of their answer, basically. And now this test subject is primed with group conformity. And the point of this experiment was to test how the answer of 7 of these actors could influence the test subject in placing their own answer, or how much of their own critical thinking would be affected by this group fallacy. Several versions of this experiment was conducted, some where the actors would answer correctly, some where some of the actors would answer correctly and some would answer incorrectly, and some where all of the actors would answer incorrectly, just to give some variety and test different instances. What Asch found was that in cases where the actors would all answer correctly, the individual test subjects would have an error rate of less than 1%. In the case where all the actors were told to answer incorrectly, the test subjects would conform to the actors 35% of the time. 35% of the time, a test subject would go against their own instinct, their own critical thinking, and their own beliefs, what they could see with their own eyes, in order to conform to a group. 35%, significant, insignificant, up to debate. But what we can see is, in a controlled experiment, a group can influence the behavior and thinking of an individual. Several interpretations and critiques of this experiment were brought up. However, It exhibits that ultimately social conformity does influence our decision making. Now, what do we take away from this? Social conformity is an important link between members of a group in a society. To a certain extent, there's a lot of benefit in having shared values and goals in social groups in order to organize. And organizing in large groups is one of humanity's greatest strengths, one through which we can accomplish and solve a lot of social problems. But the question arises as to where do we draw the line between groupthink and critical thinking by oneself? We see analogs of this play out constantly in politics, where leaders maintain authority through performance rather than substance, and subordinates pretend not to notice obvious failures of an authority administration. We see this in authoritarian regimes where officials publicly praise failing policies or actions of their administration. We see it when authority figures publicly deny obvious facts because acknowledging them would expose their weakness as a leader. And any dissent of this is threatened, and it's equated to disloyalty. Why has this story endured for so long? I think it survives because it addresses timeless human behaviors, fear of being seen as ignorant, a desire for social acceptance, the fragility of authority built on appearance rather than of substance. It's relevant because we keep seeing being reenacted. What can an individual do to remedy this in themselves? I think that's the hardest takeaway from this story, because at the root of the story, this problem isn't about other people. I think it's about us as individuals. I think in this story, we're not to relate with the child that speaks the truth. I think in the story, we're supposed to relate with the emperor. The key takeaway from this, I think, is we'll all lie to ourselves when the cost of honesty is too high. So a goal isn't to find moral purity. I think it's finding a way to design our lives where honesty doesn't cost as much. When we notice that we're about to pretend, the danger isn't silence, it's self-rationalization. Rationalizing that we're pretending because others might know something about us. Others might know something that I don't. This probably isn't the time. It's not my place to say. Everyone seems fine with it. So in the story, these same rationalizations are the clothes forming in real time. I think a takeaway is when, as individuals, we're faced with the need to conform, is to pause and kind of think, if we were alone, would we feel the same way? And I think a big takeaway from this is to be a safe person for other people's truths. It's subtle, yet powerful. To have people around us that won't repeat our own lies to us is priceless, but we have to welcome that. Hope you enjoyed some thoughts of the Emperor's New Clothes. I've managed to finish this painting of DJT in the process. I kind of like how this turned out. Anyway, till next time, peace.